And to answer the question about the background, we can access that by hitting our composition settings. That the command for that is Command K. So when you open that up, you'll be the same exact composition settings that we had when we opened it up at the beginning, and you can click this box here to change the color, kind of like Photoshop squares or like other things in Adobe, or you can eyedrop anything. So if I want to eyedrop any color here, that could work out. I'm going to just keep it white though for now. So let's resize our square. I'm going to move our anchor point. This is where I was. The command is the pan behind tool. That's what it's called. The command is Y, and you can move this anchor point around if you do that. But let's say if we wanted it right in the center, we would snap it by holding command, and After Effects will snap it to like these intersection points. So you can do it here, or like along the center, or like any of these other anchor points here. I'm gonna put it up at this top right now because that's where it's gonna scale from in like the video. So if I want to scale this, I'm just gonna drag this blue square down, and I think that looks okay. And then if I want to create another rectangle, I want to just copy and paste the same thing. So to do that, the command is Command D to duplicate, and it'll duplicate a layer on top of it. And you could move that same one around. Everyone good? Yes.
To make that rectangle, what did you do again?
I used the rectangle tool right here.
And you filled it in with the color.
Yes. So when you create mine just did fill and without a stroke because that's what I had before. But when you click this tool, it'll give you fill and stroke capabilities here. And so you can choose your fill color with the eyedrop or hex or whatever you do color with, and strokes the same way. You would just click this and it would activate it once you set a color. But let's say you didn't want to fill and you want to make that transparent. What you can do is hold Option and click on the square, and it'll filter through like a gradient, radial gradient, or nothing. But I'm just gonna keep it a color. Another way to access that is these shape layers all have keep the history of that shapes building. So that might have not came out that right, but so you can go into the contents of each one and adjust. You have stroke and fill here also that you can delete, or change the colors here also. So if I want to change the fill color of our first rectangle, I would go into this color box and I could change this to yellow or something.
You said the hotkey was the Option and click on fill to get transparency?
You would just cycle through. There's it goes fill, regular color, and then linear gradient, radial gradient, then transparent. Okay. Any questions? Yes. I use the pan behind tool, which is right here, or just regular Y is the button, and then you can drag the point around when you have the tool selected. You could just let go and it'll just stop there. So I'm gonna make this rectangle a little bigger because I think it looks okay. Alright, does everyone have this? Yes? Alright. Okay, so in the animation that we have here, it kind of just scales down with some text. So let's create the text. We do that by using this text tool, which is Command T. And you could just click anywhere in the composition and it'll create a new text layer, which is this red color. And you can just type when that's activated and do whatever you want. So I'm just going to say After Effects Workshop. And there should be a character window right here, but if it's not showing up for you here already by your default, there's a lot of different window settings. You can pull up any of these windows in this window menu bar, and you can pull up whatever you want here. So we're going to be using the character window, which lets us adjust our font and our color and these kind of things. So I'm just going to stick with Helvetica regular, think that'll be fine for now. But you can do whatever fonts on your computer to your heart's desire. Yeah, and let's say I want to make it white. I would just take this and then change this is the color that's of the text layer that's selected. So we have a black fill without a stroke right now. So I can double click this and change the color. We'll just go with white. Everyone got that? Yes.
Mine's like super pixelated. Really blurry when we're talking.
Okay. Is this menu bar for you guys not on full or something?
Yeah, it's on full.
It's on full? Okay, well, I'll look at it afterwards, personally. Anyone else having that problem? No? Okay. Alright, so I'm gonna create another one for the bottom caption bar. I'm gonna duplicate that layer. That was Command D again. And then drag this down. Chris on. And if I want to make this bigger, there's many ways to do this. You can either adjust the font size and the layer will adjust the size of its content. So if I have everything selected, I can use anything that's blue is draggable in After Effects. So I can just drag this to make it bigger by increasing the font size. Or another way to do it is the actual layer itself. You can scale it up by dragging. Oh, sorry. That was I hit S to open the scale property, which is a shortcut. But you can find that by twirling this down, and then twirling down transform, and scale will be in there. And you can scale this up that way too. Okay. Maybe I'll make it bold or something. Okay. Yeah, so you guys can design whatever you guys want to do. It's kind of like typography or whatever, but I'm about the animation, so this is good enough for me. So these are like all the contents that make up this situation here. So now that we have everything set up, we can start animating it. So I'm gonna rename this big rectangle, which was hitting enter when you click on the layer. Okay. So everything in After Effects is done with Keyframe Animation. So is everyone familiar with what that is? Yes? If you don't know, now's a good time to raise your hand. Okay, awesome. I don't have to explain keyframes. So we can keyframe pretty much anything that has this stopwatch icon on it in After Effects, which it means to set a keyframe. So I'm gonna, like in this animation, all I'm doing is animating the scale of these boxes. So I'm gonna set a keyframe for the scale of both of these boxes. The way we do that is we can set go to the scale option and then hit the watch, and that will set a keyframe on our timeline wherever our tracker is. So that's there, and since this is like the end result we want to get from the animation, I'm gonna go back in time a little bit, and I want to start from 0, but I don't want it to scale up like this because I think that looks kind of weird. So what I'm gonna do is break the link so it doesn't keep the same ratio. Does that make sense? All right. So all I'm gonna do is scale the Y direction. Yes. All right. So I'm going from 0 till I guess I was at 40.5%. So this is the animation we got going on our timeline right now. And you can scrub by dragging the little like tracker thing around. Or if you want to preview it in real time, you're going to want to use a RAM preview, which is Control-0, and your RAM will preview the animation for yourself. So if I did that, there it goes in real time. Okay, since we're working right here, yes.
So my text isn't going away with the box.
Oh, mine's just going away because it's white and the background's white. So let me change this so it's not confusing. Be like purple or something. Yes. So it's like that, right? Okay. So if we were gonna preview this, it would go all the way to the end of our like 3-second animation, and we have to wait for it to come back and loop around. So if I want to shorten the length of like the working area, we can do that by controlling this little like gray bar right here. It's called the workspace or work area. So we can go to the end, this little blue bar, and drag it down to however long we want it. So when we do that, when we do RAM preview, which is Control 0, it'll just loop that length. So we can just kind of focus that and not really work on computers too hard. The hotkey for that is N if you're into hotkeys. Is anyone here into hotkeys? Yes. Okay, I'll keep saying them. That's N, and the beginning one is B, and you would just drag that. So if I want to set it here, and it always sets it wherever your tracker is. So if I did B here, it moved the beginning point all the way over to here. Okay, awesome. Yes.
How can you move your keyframes like for a layer?
So the way we would move a keyframe is we will select the keyframe by clicking on it or dragging and clicking on it, and you can move this anywhere in our timeline here. So that's pretty flexible. And if you want to get a little more detailed, you can zoom into your timeline with like the little mountain, these little mountain things, and you can zoom into the timeline. The hotkey for that is plus or minus, without the shift. So just over here. All right. So there's one box we have animated. Let's animate the other box. So we can actually copy and paste keyframes, but since we're kind of different scale here, I'm just going to do it manually. I'm hitting S to open just the scale option, and I'm setting a key at the end of our animation here. At the beginning, I'm going to break the link and bring this back down to 0. Yes? Alright, so what we have going here is a nice little, like, both of them are dropping down. Okay. But if you look at our original little project, they kind of come from the same point. So the way we're going to do that is this concept of parenting. Parenting is like when the child will follow the parent, like in real life. So you can make layers follow the like animation of another layer. It's like pretty nifty stuff. But so if I want this big rectangle to scale at from the same point that the small rectangle is coming from, I'm gonna parent the big rectangle to the small rectangle. So at this beginning point, I'm gonna have the big rectangle be parented by the small rectangle. If this option in your timeline isn't open, there's a good chance it's not. You're gonna hit this little blue thing down here. It's a circle and a square that are overlapping. Or this one actually. Oh, I guess it just shows up for everyone. But yeah, some of these options might not show up for you, and you can access them right here. So now that we have that, okay, well, it looks like we have technical difficulties. Okay, give me a second. Okay. Before we do the keyframe of the scale for the big rectangle, we're gonna parent it before we do that, so that it scales there. And then I'm gonna scale it from this point here. Okay. Oh. Yes?
How do you set up the bullet point down
These things? The keyframes?
Yeah, my animation doesn't work.
Okay, so okay, we'll do on this big rectangle again. Right now we're at 100% or 92%. And so when I want to scale, I'm just gonna hit this little watch here, and that will set a keyframe. And if you want to edit that, you're gonna have to move to another place in your timeline. Otherwise, if you keep your timeline indicator on top of this keyframe, any edits you're gonna make is gonna happen at that time. So you're saying that at 10 frames, I want it to be at this however much value. So I'm gonna have to move back in time to make an edit over time. So it'll come out like that. Okay. All right. So now we should have our animation coming out from the same point. Does everyone have that? No. Okay, let me go over the parenting again. So before we parent, before we set keyframes on our big rectangle, you want to parent. So I made a mistake the first time. So before we have keyframes here, we want to set this parent to the small rectangle. Oh, I switched these layers around. So I moved the small rectangle on top of the big rectangle. So we can do that by setting this box right here to small rectangle, or this thing is called the pick width, and we can click this and drag it to any layer. If you don't know its name or something, you can just set it like that. So I'm going to set a scale keyframe here at the end of this animation. At the beginning of the animation, I'm going to go from 0. So we should have that. Are we good now? Yes? Alright, I'm going to keep going. So that's the little box animation we have going from the beginning. But if we watch our animation here, it's kind of like a little robotic and a little fast, so I'm going to move out our animation, the end of our animation keyframes to the little later in the timeline, so it takes a longer time for it to animate. Right now, it's moving kind of robotically, so I want to make it a little more smooth. So I'm going to do that by making the curve of the animation non-linear. So this is like where FX is kind of mathematical, because when you set keyframes that are diamonds, basically the speed of the animation goes linearly. So like if you're going from like point 1 to point 10, it's just going to hit that an even like interval between each second. So, but you can set this animation curve to like an actual curve. And the way we're going to do that is with this thing called Easy Ease. So we do that by selecting our animations, right-clicking them, and then you can go to Keyframe Assistant and hit Easy Ease. And then they turn into hourglass shapes. Yes.
Is there a graph editor in After Effects?
There is. So if you want to access the graph editor, you're going to have to hit this icon right here. But you can only really make it linear, a non-linear, if you do Easy Ease, and then you can adjust the curve that's created. So you can see the change here. So now they are like curves, but before they were just like linear speed, like that. Say that again?
How do you do the whole like easy ease?
All right. So we select our keyframes, and then we can right-click them, go down to Keyframe Assistant, and then go to Easy Ease.
I'm not seeing keyframes.
You have to right-click the keyframe, not the space. Okay, so now that we have these little hourglass shapes, the animation will look a little more smooth. It's still moving a little fast, so I'm going to move this out a little bit. And I just think that looks better, but you can do whatever you want. Some people like linear, but I think Easy Ease looks pretty awesome. Alright, so we got this going here. I'm going to make the big rectangle animate a little afterwards, so I'm just going to drag our layer a little bit down the timeline. Yes, so we can drag these layers through time, kind of like in a Premiere file, you would just drag your footage around. So now what we have is the big rectangle coming in a little after, and I think it makes it look nice and cute. Alright, so I'm going to make this a little more obvious also. We'll give it that ugly purple look. Yes. Alright. So we only want these things to show when these boxes exist on top of them. So that's kind of complicated, but let's do it. What we're going to do is select both of our rectangles and duplicate them. That's Command D. And I'm going to drag them on top of our text layers. So we should have text layers sandwiched in between two rectangles. Alright. And they disappear because the rectangles are covering the text layers. Kind of like Photoshop, if you had a layer on top of another layer, it's going to show above it. So what I'm going to do, also another note is that when you duplicate a layer, it keeps its keyframes also. So the shortcut to open your keyframes for a layer is U. So if you click one of these rectangles and hit U, it'll open up the keyframes for that layer, which is pretty nifty. So I'm going to move the big rectangle on top of Chris Hahn, and then I'm going to move After Effects Workshop underneath the small rectangle so that they're kind of lined up to the rectangle that's covering them. Does that make sense? Yes? Alright. So we want, this is where like the idea of like a mask comes in from Photoshop. We can actually use this rectangle's animation as a mask for the text layer, which is pretty amazing. We can do that with this thing called a track mat right here. And if this isn't showing up for you, you're going to have to hit one of these two blue lights again. So we can set the After Effects Workshop text layers mask to the small rectangles animation by going here, and we're going to do alpha matte small rectangle, which means basically whenever there's color on this layer above it, small rectangle 2, that means that you're going to show the layer After Effects Workshop text layer. So if I do that, it's going to just animate the text layer in. Like that. I'm going to do the same exact thing for Chris Hahn text layer. Alpha matte. So now what we should have is two little rectangles animating some text in like that. Alright. But that looks kind of very non-organic because these text layers are just kind of sitting there, not moving along with it. So what you can do to make it look a little better is actually animate your text the opposite direction, and it'll make it look a lot smoother. So I'm going to open up these keyframes just for reference, and I'm going to go to Chris Hahn and also After Effects Workshop. You can command click to select multiple things, or shift click, which will select a range of them. That's shift click, and command click is selecting separate things. Okay, and I'm gonna keyframe the position aspect of it. So I'm gonna hit P for position, and it opens up the position properties for these text layers. All right. Yes. Okay, sure. So what we have is we would have no track mat here. Okay, so we have our rectangles covering our text at the end, but we want them to only exist when these rectangles exist. So I'm going to go to track mat. It's going to be the second one right here, the one with the circle and the square. Yes. So alpha matte is the one that you want for the situation. Awesome. Alright, so let's make these little text things a little more organic. I'm going to animate the position against the grain of the animation of the rectangles. So I'm going to do that by selecting both of these layers and then keyframing the position. It'll actually keyframe on both of them. And then I'm going to go back in time a little bit and then drag. You can drag our text layers down and it'll set another keyframe right here. I did that by using the black cursor to select it and move it down, but you can also use the blue things right here to drag the position like this. So it just has to be something really subtle, nothing really dramatic here. So we got that, and then I'm going to easy ease these keyframes as well. All right. I'm going to bring these back too. So what we should have going now is like this kind of animation where it comes back up. Makes it look a little smoother. That might be moving a little fast, so I'm gonna have this be a less dramatic jump here. Alright, everyone good with that? Awesome. Okay, so if you look at the edges of this animation, they're really hard. I'm on third. Okay, I'll explain this menu. Basically, we're only working with a little bit of layers here, so my computer can handle it. But if you had a lot of layers going here, it'd be working the computer a lot to pump out every frame with your RAM. So you can lower the resolution intentionally just for preview with this menu. So if I'm on full, you can see these lines are really hard in the animation, and it makes it look kind of unnatural because that's not really how our eye sees things. So like if a car moved really fast past you, you wouldn't see each outline, you would just see like a blur. So that's called motion blur. We turn that on by hitting this option of a layer. It's the one with like 3 little circles going around, and it says motion blur also. And so anything that's animating, we want to blur it with the motion. So I'm just gonna select this option for our layers. And so if we do that and we preview, oh, it's the same thing. What happened, Chris? Well, you have to sometimes if there's a lot of things going on, you don't want to actually do that. So you have to activate motion blur in the timeline as well as in each layer. So you do that by hitting the other 3 circle one right here. Yes? Alright, so when we preview, there's some motion blur there. And maybe it's not easy to tell, but if I come here, you can see it's blurring out on the edge, which makes it look a lot more pretty in my opinion. So this is without motion blur. It just doesn't look right sometimes. And then this is with motion blur. Alright, very discreet, but these small things make a difference sometimes. Alright, so that's basically the animation I've got going here. You see how there's like colors coming in a little before the squares? We can do that too. It adds a little bit more depth to the animation. So if I want to do that, I'm going to select just this big and small rectangle on the bottom, duplicate those layers. Alright, so we have those 2 duplicated. I'm going to drag them below the previous one. So I just drag them below in the timeline. And then I'm going to change their color, so this is kind of obvious. You can do that by going to this fill option here. We'll make them another really bad color, I don't know, red. Alright, so the way it's right now, you're not going to really see it too well, but I can move these earlier in the timeline so they come in a little before the other 2. So I dragged our layers to the left a little bit, and when I animate that, it adds a little more depth to animation. Okay. And that's pretty much what's going on in this situation here. It looks like there's a lot more going on there than there actually is. It's only 8 layers of shapes, so that's pretty good. So is there any questions with that animation? Or any concepts discussed in the last animation? Awesome, you guys are really good at this. Alright, let's if we want to animate it out, because it builds back out like this, what you could do is you could go back and copy all these keyframes over, but that'd be kind of a hassle. So what we can do is what's called pre-comping in After Effects. And compositions, as you know, are these like sequence, kind of half sequence, half Photoshop file situation that we got going. but they kind of act like groups in After Effects too. So what I can do is select all these layers and pre-comp them so that I can just manage this whole animation in itself instead of having to manage like 8 layers. So I'm going to select all the layers, I'll shift click, and do Command Shift C, which will bring up this pre-compose window. Alright, so what pre-compose is doing is it's going to make a new composition holding these 8 layers. So you might say, why are you trying to do that? Because you already have a composition created? Well, in just a second here, let's just say pre-comp. So pre-comp is here, and lower third now houses a composition called pre-comp. And pre-comp was added to your little project window here. So we have pre-comp sitting there, and lower third sitting there. And these things move like footage that you would have in Premiere. So you can move this around. And what that means is we can actually like time remap this thing to move backwards. So animate backwards. That's like a nice little trick to save you a lot of time. So you only have to animate half of the actual animation. Second half could just be automated by moving it backwards. So the way I'm going to do that is first we have a lot of excess little footage going on to the back here because the animation stops right here, and maybe we want a little bit of pause. And right here what I can do is drag our footage length down here. But that kind of takes a long time, so like if you're cutting in Premiere you wouldn't want to drag everything down. So the shortcut here is Alt right bracket, and it'll bring your thing within 1 frame of the animation. And I'm going to duplicate our pre-comp and move it back here. But right now it's just going to do like this animation again twice, which is not what we want. I want this to go backwards. So I'm going to right click this layer, this little layer right here, and then go to time, and then time reverse layer. And then this little blue bar will come down. That'll tell you that you've time remapped it. And so now what's going to happen is it's going to go in forwards and then rewind the animation. So you just saved yourself half of the work, which is great. And you can use this in whatever you want to do. Also, the nice thing about pre-comps is that you can scale these down. So let's say you want to make a lower third animation, but you don't want to work in like a full like 1080p like situation because that's going to be a lot more taxing on your computer. You can make a smaller one and move these pre-comps around in your composition. So if our pre-comp was like this size, we can move this around anywhere on our timeline, or I mean on the composition. So if you wanted a nice small thing in the corner, it would just animate there by itself, which is pretty convenient. Okay. Yes. Okay, so what I had was just this layer. I duplicated this layer, and then I brought this layer out to here. I'm going to right click the actual bar. There's a section called time, and then go to time reverse layer. Alright, and then that should just do it for you. Alright, okay, do you guys want to see the other animation, how it's done, or would you guys rather know more about working with this and Premiere at the same time? Can we get a poll of the room? The other animation?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the Premiere thing's pretty short too, so we'll do the other animation. So the other animation, I'm just going to create a new composition, Command N, or hit this little film strip. Let's do it, animation 2. Alright, I'm just going to do the same exact settings here. It saves it from my previous settings. Alright. So the animation we're going to make is like a little pencil thing. Okay. So there's, if you break down the elements, there's just a square animating first, and then another rectangle animating, and then these little triangles animating out. So the way we're going to do that, we'll just break it piece by piece. So let's start with the square. If I want to zoom out of our viewer, that's going to be less than sign, or comma. That's going to zoom out. Period is going to zoom in here. Okay. I'm going to create a square with a rectangle tool, or Q. And if you hold shift, it'll keep it at that square ratio. I'm going to move our anchor point over to the center of the square. And I'm going to change this color to something a little prettier. I don't know, we'll go with pink. Make the same thing. Okay, and then if you wanted like a logo or something, you could put it on top of that. I'll just go with a text layer that says 1. Alright, so if we move our shape layer around, you'll notice that it doesn't move the 1 around, which is unfortunate. But we can use parenting to make the 1 follow the shape. I'm going to rename this square. And we can do that with our Pickwick again. So now the 1 will follow the square, which is awesome. And it just kind of comes in from the side, so it's going to start over here.
I'm sorry, can you do everything you just did again? It won't even let me move my 1. It's being weird. Like,
Okay. We'll start over. Okay. So, was I moving too fast there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Too fast for me.
So we're going to make a square with Q, or hitting this rectangle tool. And then we can make a square by holding shift and making it. If this is selected, we can change our fill color up here. And we're going to move our anchor point behind into the center of the square. So now it's in the center of the square. I'm going to create a 1 by using the text tool. Just clicking and then making a 1. Alright, so I was having problems selecting the center of that, because if you hit one of those like anchor point squares, it's just going to scale it. So I kind of have to zoom in there by hitting period, or it's also Command plus if you into more keyframe hotkey situations. And I can just kind of move this in here and scale this up if I wanted to. And I'm going to move this to the center also. And if you really want to center them together, what you can do is select both, and there's this tab called the Align tab, and if it's not there for you, you can find it here in a window, Align. And align layers to selection. Our selection is 2 layers, and you can center them to each other by using horizontal center alignment and also vertical center alignment. Alright. And then I'm going to parent the 1 to the square. Alright, so now the 1 should follow the square, which is pretty good. So the animation starts from off to the side and kind of bounces in. So I'm going to drag our square over here and then go open its position properties, which is P, and then set a keyframe with the watch, and let's say like over I don't know, like 10 frames. It'll come in here, and then it kind of bounces back a little bit, so that happens a little faster. We'll have that right there. Yes.
Do you have it selected somewhere to make an automatic keyframe after you've made the first one every time you move the
Okay.
object? Is there a way to turn that off?
Way to turn that off?
Yeah, like because it's automatically making a new keyframe range.
Yes.
Every time.
So After Effects will just automatically make keyframes.
After you set the first one.
What if you have the stopwatch selected? It's just in keyframe mode. So if there's no keyframe already set on wherever your timeline indicator is, it'll just create a new keyframe at that point.
Oh, but you can turn it off at any like.
If you turn off the watch, it'll delete all your keyframes, which is unfortunate. But if you want to just edit and play around with a certain point, you can just be over one of the keyframes, and it will just kind of move around by itself there. So our animation's kind of bouncing in like that, which is pretty nice. I'm gonna put more easy ease on that because I think it looks better. Alright. It's gonna be too fast. So what we have is our 1 bouncing right there. If that's moving a little fast, you can adjust the time with our keyframes here. I'm going to turn on motion blur also. Alright, so we have the one coming in, and then right when it hits right here, we want to have a little rectangle come up, this little gray one. So I'm going to create a rectangle with the shape tool again. Oh, and the thing about the shape tool is, if you have any other layers selected, it's going to either make a mask or add to the shape layer. So if I had square selected already, and I went to the shape tool and drew another shape, you see it didn't make another layer. What happened was it added this rectangle to this square layer. So now there's two shapes in one layer, which is okay if you want that, but if we're animating these specific points, that's not what we want. We want each shape on its own layer. So I'm going to make sure that nothing is selected when I make these shapes. I'm just going to actually duplicate this square and delete its keyframes. Was that too fast right there? No? Okay.
What's the hotkey for the keyframe?
Oh, it's U. As an umbrella. Okay. So I'm going to move our square over and scale it down to a small rectangle. I'm going to change the color to gray. Alright. Oh, you're totally fine. Alright, so it comes in around right here. So that's after our square is done with its animation. So, oh, okay. I want this square to start scaling at this point. So I'm going to hit S on square 2. I'm going to rename it rectangle actually. And then keyframe right here. And it's only animating along the Y, so I'm going to break the link again. I'll start at 0, so start at 0. And then over, let's say like 8 keyframes or so, 8 frames or so, make it hit 100%. I'm going to easy ease these also. So what we have going here is the square and then the little rectangle. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just talking, thinking with my hands.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
How did you make it the nonlinear thing again?
I'm going to select our keyframes, right click a keyframe, and then go to Keyframe Assistant, easy ease.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then
Go ahead. I have a question. Animating the dimensions of the gray rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
You have right now it's uniform, right? X and Y at the same time. If we want it to be like X first and then Y,
Okay.
a whole nother animation.
No, you can do that. What happens behind the scenes After Effects when you break this chain, this link, is it creates actually two separate speed curves for X and Y. So if I go into the graph editor here, okay, how am I not easy? You'll see that this green one is animating because that's just the Y animating, but this red bar is X because it's staying the same. So if you wanted to, you could play around with values. Also, since on the timeline it works on one line, let's say I want to hit, I have X start moving right here. Then I could just start animating right here also. So there's just different ways to do it. So either speed or with value, you can do it either way. So we have, oh, you have another question back there?
yeah, I was trying to do the animation on the little second rectangle, and when I put the Y to 0, it moved it all the way up here. So it's going like this, but it's coming down and going like this at the same time. I'm not sure why. it's
Okay,
doing that.
you want to make sure that your anchor point for the layer is set to the center, because it's going to scale to wherever your anchor point is.
I moved it to the center. I thought I did.
We could talk about after this thing too, if it's still having problems. So yeah, that's the situation going on there, and then I'm gonna make the little triangle things, and that's just a combination of a rectangle and a triangle at the tip. So I'm gonna take another one of these, duplicate this rectangle. Now we have rectangle 2. Call it pencil or something. And then I'm gonna move that over and scale this one up a bunch. And change this color to yellow, I guess. Alright. So we have that, and that's a little long. I'm going to move its anchor point to the left side because it's coming, in this animation, it's coming out of this left little pocket here. So I'm going to want to move this anchor point with our pan behind tool. And I'm going to draw a triangle on its tip. There's a couple ways to do this. You can just do a square and put in the same layer, or you can do a star, like there's this thing called a polystar. You can make it a triangle. But I think pen tool is the best. You can do whatever is comfortable for you in After Effects or Photoshop. Pen tool works the same way that it'll work in any other Adobe application. So I'm just going to create a triangle right here. And then maybe adjust it a little bit. Okay. Alright, that's fine, I think. Oh, no. Well, that's good enough for now. And so, since I made that in the layer of pencil, I did the pen tool while I had pencil selected. It actually created 2 shapes within pencil. So if I go into the contents, there's shape 1, which is our triangle, and rectangle 1, which is the body of the pencil, which is what you want. But if you created 2 different layers, you can parent them and do it that way. But I think this is a little more convenient and less layers to manage. So this is animating out right here. And this is just using the same trick that we used for the first animation with the rectangles and the other colors. What I'm going to do is duplicate our pencil here, like 3 times, and make each one of these a different color. Maybe like this one, blue or something, and this one, purple, just make it really obvious, and green. Okay, so we have, these all have different colors, and what I want to do is have them come in after, come a little before our yellow pencil comes in, and I want yellow pencil to be on the top at the end of the day. So what I'm going to do is take these 3 and chop them off from the beginning. That's Alt left bracket, and you'll see that their keyframes are still here too. And I'm just going to move them up a little earlier. And move everything up after the gray rectangle is done. So now our gray rectangle will animate out, and then 4 different colors will come out and then animate in.
What's going on with that green one?
Oh, okay. So I didn't want the Y scale to also increase, but I guess that works out a little bit. All right. So that's that. And then if you want, what's it called? If you want a text layer here, you would just do the text tool and then add it. Digital Lounge. And then we could drag that into this yellow layer. And the same way we did the rectangles animating the text before, we could just set a track mat to the pencil. You'll notice with these track mats, you want okay. I'm gonna have to duplicate this. With these track mats, you want the layers to be below the layer that's masking them. So now Digital Lounge only shows up when the yellow shows up there. Yep. So that's that animation. And if you want to go backwards, you would do the same thing. We can just pre-comp it and time reverse it the same way we did the first one. I guess now we could talk about like how to use this with Premiere. So there's different ways to do that, and different people have different things. So like I don't use Premiere that often. I usually just make these for people. So I'll just export these animations by themselves. The way we can do that is adding it to the render queue. We do that by going to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. And that will add the current selected composition to the render queue. So you'll see here that a new window pops up that says render queue, and from here you can set different settings. So most of these animations are going to be overlaid on top of another video. So what I want to do is keep its alpha channel. If you're not familiar with that, basically alpha controls and like the transparency property of a layer. So right now it's just set to RGB, but I want to have the ability to have alpha as well. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with like codecs and stuff, but there's a lot of different codecs you can pick from here. But one that is really high quality and a lot of data, but it holds and it keeps a really high quality and also alpha channel is animation. And here we can set it so it keeps its alpha. And so what I do is hit OK, and these settings are set, and I can output this to wherever on my computer. And when I drag that into a Premiere footage, it will have its alpha channel and be transparent over another object. But if you're working on this alone, that's kind of like cumbersome to render something out and then to put into another sequence to render that one out. So you can actually dynamically link this to Premiere within Premiere. So the way we would do that is you go to Premiere.
Did you do it not in Premiere, but like in like Final Cut or something?
I'm not as familiar with Final Cut personally, so you'd have to look into that.
Like if you could like render it and like export it out and then use that.
Oh, definitely this way would work for sure. It's basically exporting a video with alpha channel, and you could send that to anything.
It's basically it saves as a file then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this one would export a QuickTime.mov and whatever is capable with that. So Final Cut's definitely capable. But if you want just a dynamic link, we're gonna just create a new project really quick. And let's add some footage. Maybe something like this. Okay. And if I had a sequence with that, and I wanted to put something on top of this, I would just select this. Okay. Right click this box and replace with After Effects composition. And that actually opens up After Effects and puts our linked comp here. And I can just put our compositions on top of that. So lower third can just go be placed right here. And now this thing will just animate on top of that.
Well, it's more difficult than saving it as a file.
And so when we export this out, it will like dynamically link to Premiere. Yes. Okay. That's pretty much it. Is there any questions? Sorry if I moved too fast.
Okay, one more time when you were saving as, you said video codec to animation, and then what were the two others that you said that you would save it as?
Here?
Yes. RP. Oh, okay, RP alpha.
Oh yeah, you want to make sure that there's alpha channel included here. Because if there's no alpha, what's going to happen is basically the white background that we set is going to come in with a white background into your like whatever editor you're using. So you don't want that to cover up whatever you're doing. So that's that. But you can choose whatever you want here in these options. So like if you just wanted a white background, like an intro kind of thing, I like H.264, so I just export H.264, and it could just be a lot lighter file, because animation is a really heavy file.
So RBG plus alpha, that's the one that makes the transparency?
Yes. Anything else? All right. I think that's it then. So if you have any questions, you can come and ask me afterwards, or we have like pens, and I guess we could do USBs first come first serve. They're in that box right there. But yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you.